Okay, welcome back. I've got my friend Peter Pham here for another episode of I Mustache You Something. Uh, I'm so excited to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, the probably not the only one, but one of just a very small handful of people that makes me look like the nice, easygoing Sunday school teacher.
Yeah, pretty
um,
much. Most anyone's easy going compared to me in terms of Sunday school tea classes.
Yeah, like, is there like I can't imagine there's anyone that you're like, wow, that guy scares me.
No, that was my role to be the enforcer.
Yeah. Um, I I think anything that we mention in terms of details will be incriminating. So let's
This is where we need a lawyer for the statute of limitations.
right. Yeah, I think without legal counsel, I think we keep it to yeah, you didn't mess with Peter Pham. Like Peter Pham says, this is how it's gonna be. You say whatever you say, man, just please. Like, I want to be on the good list.
Legal counsel, ecclesial counsel, it all works. Either one.
So maybe we can start with that. Maybe tell me a little bit about other than petrifying them to keep them in line. What was your strategy in terms of like actual service, like in terms of saying, okay, like we have a class and we have students, like what's the goal? Like why have Sunday school?
Why we're doing what we're doing, basically.
Yeah.
Actually, for me, it all depended on which age group I was teaching at the time. Because for the longest time, I had like junior high boys. So a lot of them are, you had to put kind of spend 6 months out of the year first proving that you're the alpha dog. And then they fell in line. And then part of it is to put the fear of God in them, uh, more so the fear of the devil. Like I remember one class, and I don't know what I can't to this day I can't remember what they did, but they so angered and upset me that the next week I came in. 2020 had, this is back in like late 80s, had run some sort of footage of an exorcism, and we're talking about exorcism. So these guys, they were eighth grade. So I showed them this clip of the exorcism and basically told them the devil is real. You can see that here, and he's out to get you. And our job is to bring you to God to protect you from this. The next week, all these boys with dark circles under their eyes. One of them's like, I can't close the door. I'm afraid to go to the bathroom at night. And like, I mean, they're all grown adults now, and they're actually well adjusted, relatively speaking. And I mean, physician, they're all professionals, and all of them serve now. And but it was, yeah, I don't remember what they did. I think it was something about like disrespecting the liturgy, and during liturgy, it's because I always, my key thing was always understand what you're doing and why. That's the whole thing. So
And always be scared.
isn't the fear of God the beginning of wisdom? And
so,
it's not the whole of it; it's the beginning of it. So once you start them on that path, and then you show them.
so I don't even know where to start because like I'm afraid to ask you if like you really think that because
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.
well, not that. Like, I mean, that's the proverb, so like
Yeah.
we're not going to push back on that. But um, the so you said 2020 hindsight, right? So in retrospect, walk me through what you liked about what happened, and maybe what maybe needed a little bit of tweaking
In terms of
in terms
service.
of your relationship with these boys, and
Actually, it's funny because
execution.
Moret calls them my cult. These guys will still come up to me and like I can ask them anything and they'll be willing to do it. And it's not because of, yeah, I scared them or something. That gives them kind of like war stories that they can bond with together. Kind of like it kind of unified them together as a kind of community because they had that shared experience. But it was to my larger kind of ethos in dealing with them. Because A, I never lied to them. I never put up any false fronts. I showed interest in what, or tried to enter into their world as best I could. So usually before we started class, they'd have their chips and sodas and snacking and whatever before we started the lesson proper. And I'd hear them talking about various things. Like one time they're all talking about this new show or whatever. So I went home, watched the show just to see what they were talking about. And the other thing is I always treated them with respect. That yeah, I not necessarily didn't treat them as equals, but I still treated them with respect.
So make
And
that distinction for us, because I think that's an important distinction to make where, being their buddy and
yeah,
disrespecting them are kind of pitfalls. So make that distinction for us.
well, because I don't even know if it was something kind of I I, I consciously thought of because this was also something instilled in me my parents. Like, yes, we love you and everything, but we're parents and you're you. In that, and that's kind of like how, and we're trying to instill this to some extent with my kids is like, you call people older than you, Mister, Miss, Tant, Uncle, just to show that level of respect that you acknowledge that you're not the same as them. Uh, because this concept of being like their buddy and the buddy servant kind of takes you out of being in a respected authority figure in that you're no longer kind of let me backtrack and use an example. If I'm going to look up some information, I'm going to look in an encyclopedia and not a comic book. So I'm not going to put myself down to their level as like a comic book, but I'll be, yeah, sorry, I'm not so as eloquent with as others, but yeah, I'm not, how would I put it? But so differentiating me from them
Are
in
you, are
that,
you nervous? Are you nervous because there's people watching? Because I've never seen you struggle this much for what you're saying.
no, it's just, this isn't something that I've ever given conscious thought to.
Hmm.
So it's hard for me to put it in words because the way my brain works sometimes, it's not always verbally, so to speak.
Hmm.
It's just a lot of Im- random images and whatnot. It's a
Huh.
very disorganized place. So to formulate things in a way that others can understand it
So tell us
off the cuff
visually,
is a little.
what do you see? Like if you're going to visualize it and it's going to be um, something that instead of you're going to express it in words, but express it in pictures. So paint the picture for us of like the buddy buddy versus the like authoritarian, and then maybe we'll follow it up with the what we would consider to be kind of like a healthy balance.
I guess the key thing would be like Buddy Christ from the movie Dogma. Yeah, like I know it's Jesus and whatnot, but I don't. You can't have kind of respect for that as your Lord and Savior. He's just
Right. Right. And actually, I think you're touching on something that the incarnation and the physical presence of Christ, where he you know you know did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, right? But at the same time, he was like, hey, like let's hang out, let's go to a wedding,
right.
let's go fishing, let's kind of do normal things. But there's clearly always that recognition that they're in the presence of
something.
something,
I mean,
right?
yeah, even as much as he brought himself down to their, he was still their teacher. They always address him as master
Right.
or rabbi or however, whatever translation you're reading wants to render it, but
Right.
they always, there's some level of deference to him.
Right. And that wasn't necessarily for his benefit, because he was like, listen, I'll wash your feet, like I'll serve
Yeah,
you. Like it like had nothing to do with him. And it had everything to do with his responsibility towards them.
right. And it's that old the adage, familiarity breeds contempt.
Huh.
You've never heard that before?
I mean, yeah, but I've never applied it in this
Yeah.
context. That makes
It's
sense.
because also, yeah, it kind of goes back to this like monastic teaching where they kind of like in the monastery, it's possible for one to take communion every day of the week, but they actually advise against that.
Hmm. Tell me more.
I mean, and it's anecdotal. I don't know how it is with every monastery and every monk, but from what I've heard in these various things, is it's a teaching that, because if it's something that becomes matter of routine, you lose the awe for it, the understanding. It almost, you almost lose the understanding of what it is.
Hmm.
It's not seeing the forest for the trees.
I mean, the counterpoint, with the most obvious example being Pope Kyrillos being, you know, there's a there's a sanctity to every day, and if you have the blessing of celebrating liturgy every day, then it makes it that much more um, palpable and real.
And I want to say that that comes down to the difference in level between him and myself.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even like growing up when I was younger, and let's say during St. Mary's fast, growing up, my church had a liturgy every day during St. Mary's fast, and because we were like high school, whatever, we were there every day. It wasn't like, and maybe it was just because I was a young, stupid high schooler. But by the end of the 2 weeks, I wasn't any deeper in appreciation for the liturgy. I mean, it's something one needs. I mean, it would be an ideal to work up to, because I mean that's what heaven is: eternal communion.
Hmm.
If you don't like liturgy, you're not going to like heaven.
Are you also one of the people that thinks that we speak Coptic in heaven?
I mean, Christ did on earth. He was in Egypt for 2-3 years.
So I like I'm keeping a tally of all of the. Is he really saying, like, it
Am I
can't
serious or not?
be?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let these. I'm gonna keep letting these things go because,
No,
like,
I mean, on one level, yes, Christ probably knew a little bit of cop. Do I think that's what we're speaking in heaven? No. I mean, to put it seriously, no. Because I know out in the world, there are people that don't understand sarcasm, spoken or written, and senses of humor
or
seem to have.
or weaponized in the form of videos to show middle schoolers.
No, that was real. I can bring. I can get signed affidavits for you.
No, but
Yeah.
the experience for them was not necessarily a exercise in catechesis where you're like,
No, it was
okay,
purely punitive,
absolutely, right? Like
and it's not
someone's
like
looking
something.
for
This is
like,
something I repeated. It was this one time, and honestly, I don't know what they had did that I was so livid that my plan was next week I'm going to show them the point of why we're doing this is to keep
right.
them out of the clutch, that the devil is real, and we're trying to get you closer to God to avoid that.
And I feel like your mustache conversation is going to be like one of the few that needs to come with a disclaimer So I could be like, don't try this at home. Like Peter Pham is one of a kind. There's good reason for that. Like,
And there are kids who serve, well, they're adults now that who I served, who try to follow the same methods I used with them to lessening degrees of success, let's say.
are they in jail?
No.
Were there like
But,
massive lawsuits that the church had to pay out?
I was lucky. I was one of Abouna's favorites, but as kind of I forget what happened. But one time I got called. Well, one time I get called into his office. He's like, Peter, just don't make problems for me, please.
So I think, one of the things that I think you have always been an example to me is something that you mentioned already, which is the the importance of being sincere, where you can get away with a lot with sincerity, right? And if someone doesn't have the same sincerity as you do, right, and they think, oh well, Peter Pham got away with this, so I'm just going to do the same thing. They don't realize that there's a lot of um, personal investment that's required to put yourself in the position to say things and do things that you sort of got away with, that very, 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 very admittedly were a little bit edgy.
I always knew which side of the line to stay on. I always came very close to the edge, but never quite crossed.
Yeah.
And the thing, yeah, like yeah, like I I've never actually like hit a kid in anger
Right.
or raised a hand to them.
Right.
But I mean, in their stories and their tellings of tales, you'll have kids that, well, one incident, it's kind of funny, is that it was a Friday Bible study youth meeting, and one kid, I'm like giving the lesson, and the entire time he's playing with this rickety wooden chair that's in front of him, and just distracting me, distracting the class. So just as I'm walking by in frustration, I just kick the chair. And at the time, and the chair broke. So they were all scared and shocked and whatnot because the chair broke. But that was what it was. And then I get home and my mother's going, "What did you do to Matthew?" Apparently, somehow the story, in the time it took me to get to home from church, the story got back to my mother that I beat the kid with the wooden chair until it broke. So, but so that's kind of like a little glimpse of how gossip spreads quite quickly. But I kind of use that then to, and there are kids that will claim on retreats that they've gotten their foot trapped in a bear trap that I've set out for them, which has never happened.
But you did have a bear trap.
Yes.
That's a fact. And I'm not incriminating you here. You said bear trap. I didn't say bear trap. And anything else that you bring up, like you have the right to plead the fifth, but once you mention bear trap, I'm gonna say, yeah, but you had one.
So yeah, no, but it was always things, it was all psychological warfare, so to speak. So that was
I think
their imagination was usually greater than anything I could do to them. So, and
I think there's other videos where the person that I'm talking to feels that it's like a little too edgy and like, oh, I don't know if we should publish this. And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. Dialogue, like transparency, And they're like, oh, you should edit that part out. And I'm like, no, come on, people need to hear what you have to say. This is the first time that I'm like, I don't know if we could post this.
I look at it this way: most of these stories within the circles I've traveled in are known. A,
Yes.
B, I have nothing to lose. The people who know me and whose opinions of me that I actually respect know the truth of the situation, know who I am as an individual. So
But now I'm affiliate, like I'm a known associate of this terrorist. like like we talk about like the, isn't Mina a mandated reporter? I'm like, yeah, yeah, like, but he never actually latched the bear trap onto a kid. Like if he did, but like isn't this like undue psychological trauma that like they're subjecting the kids to? Yeah, no, that's a good point.
it was this, yeah. It was the thing was came out, the kids saw it, and I'd go, you better not try to sneak out, and leave it at that. And it goes back into my little box and sits there till next year.
And again, this is not coming from like an easy peasy, like, oh, Habibi, do whatever you want, Sunday school teacher. Like, I don't know if I don't know if I should mention the name, but actually one of the students that I had in middle school, like he was seventh and eighth grade at the time, um, and I was like, mid 20s, something like that. And I've mellowed out like significantly over the years, but like, like mid 20s, like it was like, okay, like here's how it's gonna be. And they were having trouble with that class actually, and they moved me in to like be the tough guy. And like you said, like it's 6 months of just consistent laying down the law so that they understand, like, no, there's not going to be shenanigans here. Like, we're here to respect each other. We're going to learn from each other, but like, you don't get to do whatever you want. Um, and in his late 20s, he sends me a text out of the blue that just says, Mina, I just wanted to thank you for kicking me out of Sunday school because it's helped me not get kicked out of work.
Yeah, this is it's like a weird demented version of It's a Wonderful Life,
Mm,
where the guy does all these these things which he doesn't think are impactful all throughout his life,
yeah,
and in the end it pays out
yeah.
with French. And it's kind of the same way. And it's like, I'll have kids. I don't. I mean, I've got to stop saying that because they're all adults now. But 20 years later, yeah, they're all kids to me still. So
Dude, I've said this to people and they think I'm crazy. I'm like, listen, anyone 35 or under could be 18, could be 22. I wouldn't know the difference.
yeah. So, but yeah, all these kids, like, I'll have randomly at the parking lot at the VA. I'm walking into work. Some guy stops and he goes, Peter Pham, and it was a kid that served in a retreat. He was in the did his time in the military, whatever. So I'm very bad with remembering names. I can remember faces very well, but I can't remember names. And like, saw the kid and like, and the fact that he was able to like remember me all these years. And I have this happen where these people come up to me and sometimes I don't recognize them just because last time I saw you, you were a 14-year-old little punk kid, and now you're a functional adult. And but that's kind of like the point of it. Like, yeah, my wife will call all these guys that'll come up to me like my minions, and it's because even though with all this craziness, they somehow appreciated it because it was someone that took time to try to put structure in their life, someone that took time to do something for them. I mean, it's maybe might be scaring them half to death, but someone did something above and beyond just kind of, all right, here's the lesson, guys. But remember the Bible verse. See you next week.
My daughter is 4 and my
So-
son is 2.
That's there's that aspect to it, and I mean, there's other aspects in serving them. In that, yeah, like I said, I never lied to them. I try to be as honest as I can. I mean, obviously, there's limits. I'm not. If they start asking me my confession, I'm not going to confess to them publicly. Or if they start getting personal, obviously, there's lines to be drawn. But as far as that, and the other thing was, I would tell them, I don't know. Let me find out the answer for you. Because for some reason, there's like this, especially in our community, a fear of not knowing or people knowing that you don't know. And that somehow everyone needs to know everything and have all the answers. I mean, but I was going to say, there's some in black that seem to suffer from this worse than others. And we'll just leave it at that for now. But if you want to delve more, we can delve more. But
I mean, I think anybody in a position of authority, right, has the stress and the feeling of responsibility that like they're going to be looked to for answers.
Right.
And I think that you know it's a two-way thing, right? When like I ask you, Peter, what do you think? And you say I don't know, I can take that for an answer and say, well, thank you for being honest, right? But if I have an identity crisis and I come crashing down in front of you, like because you've shattered my world, that man, Peter Pham doesn't know. Like if Peter Pham doesn't know, like I'm gonna go be despondent forever because now I feel like life has no meaning.
yeah,
So you respond with, oh, 16. And you're like, really? Six? And the other person's like, really? 16? Like, yeah, 16. Sure. And they seem to be happier with the wrong answer than no answer.
and it's funny, like with me especially, because for those who don't know me, I've lived the reputation of knowing a lot of random things and knowing lots of things, and people will come to me for random knowledge. And that if I bought into the caricature of who I am, and this, then I would be, yes, I'd start giving out false answers because people are coming to me for this, and I kind of buy into my own hype, which thankfully I haven't, not yet anyway.
Not yet.
I might be starting my own cult and being the all-knowing guru, and I mean, it seems like a nice financially successful way of getting ahead these days. If not for
So how do you develop that discipline where, you know, knowing things, right, and being known as the guy who knows things doesn't become sort of this self-perpetuating thing, or like this, you know, expectation that um,
right,
it needs to be sustained at the expense of everything else?
it comes to knowing yourself and seeing yourself in 3 dimensions. I've had kind of a weird thing for myself personally, just because looking at me, I don't look like your typical Egyptian. And I went to a very Egyptian church. And that was one thing, is I didn't have the appearance, yet I was more Egyptian in thinking and whatnot than my peers, who were much more quote unquote Americanized. Or I was more traditional or more conservative than my peers in that way. And it was kind of like, and unlike, unlike today, back then, I didn't have any Egyptians with me in school until college. I mean, high school, I had 2 other Egyptians in my year. One was a guy I knew from church. The other one was a Muslim kid. And in and then college, I had 4 4 or 5 people that were from Queens church, and that was it. So I never had like a large, between what I looked like and a large kind of strong pointer of who to be or what to be. It's kind of not making sense now. Well,
I thought it was just me. I was like,
no, yeah. Let me, yeah, where I was
problem.
going. How about this? So my struggles and knowing who I am wasn't necessarily what I am or who I am, because I made peace with being the white looking Egyptian guy that every time I went to church, someone thought I was a visitor. That's kind of the weird, has a lot of bizarre interests and doesn't quite fit any one category sort. That I made peace with even back in high school, like when people were having those issues. My biggest struggle was always why. Why am I this way? Why for like, if God made me this way? Which, yeah, it kind of sounds funny, and it's only in like retrospect, weirdly, it's like things made sense when I saw the movie Slumdog Millionaire,
Yeah.
because it was kind of like all these life experiences. Oh yeah, they led to, because I experienced this, I was able to do this in life, and this to that, and ultimately all of it. And this is kind of one of the good things I came out of, went to a Jesuit high school, and one of the mottos of the Jesuits is to the greater glory of God. So everything they did was to that end, to the greater glory of God. So kind of seeing what all my life experiences were kind of ultimately paid off in service to him in one way or another. Whether it was scaring these kids to the straight and narrow, and now that they serve and they have their own families and that they're involved in the church and pulling others, or just knowing the random things that the one kid asks the bizarre question and that he has someone that actually can answer him. And he's like, oh wait, these are real people that know stuff. They're not just these automatons that are just spewing out lesson plans and then going home.
So even in you feeling out of place, you feel that put you in a position where you wouldn't feel any more out of place by not knowing something.
Right.
Like it's like, you know, what's the square root of 372? Like, I don't know. Oh, you don't know that? There's something wrong with you. And you're like, okay, yeah, you're right. There is something wrong with me. Like, and I've known that for a while. Right? Is that
I realize there's other stuff. Yeah. Because there's other stuff I have going on besides just knowing it all.
So if someone feels pressured to make up an answer, like what's the square root of 372? 16.3. And like, is it not? I don't know, but like it's gonna affect my identity, like, because I need to know.
Right.
So where does that come from?
I guess it comes out just, it seems like the angst of this age is not knowing who you are, and everything we tend to see is people trying to find a group to belong to. I mean, that's what all of online social media is someone trying to find something that they can belong to. Whether it's, all right, so these people are upset about this thing, let me join them because I'll be the person that's upset with them, and these are my people, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or everyone's doing this stupid whatever challenge. One of the stupidest ones I heard about recently is the Benadryl challenge, where people drink down 2 bottles of Benadryl and then film themselves tripping. Yes, exactly.
what, what, like I left Facebook when, um, I think the most recent one was the ice bucket thing.
Yeah.
And
No,
not
this is
obviously I didn't leave because of the ice bucket thing. I
yeah,
left for, sanity reasons,
yeah.
but that was the thing back then. So now what like what steps did people take between the ice bucket and intoxicating themselves on Benadryl? Like like can you connect those dots for me?
It's just someone wants to be part of something bigger than themselves. And in a
Okay, but
culture that's tearing down idols, so to speak, or tearing down the institutions that were always touchstones, people are now kind of awash and at sea, and they need some sort of anchor. So they're just the same drowning man clutches at straws. I mean, they look for anything that can kind of build an identity around, and which kind of ties into this whole identity politics thing. Because I remember early 90s, mid 90s in college, the kind of, I don't know, first wave, second wave of whole gay rights movement. The whole message was, we are more than my sexuality. There's so much to me than just who I sleep with.
hmm.
And we've come now today to that's that's what it seems like. That's all I am is if
Hmm.
I don't have this in the forefront of who I am I truly gay or something? If I'm not like ramming it down your throat, so to speak, am I really
So
part of this community?
so we historically as a community have not done well, in terms of, um,
You want to give Marina sticker?
Treating outsiders, to put it mildly.
and anybody who's different, right? Anybody who doesn't conform to our ideals, we make a statement that sounds like, well, we don't accept X, and if somebody, fits within
Right.
that circle, like, sorry, you need to find somewhere else to be. Um, so I think that there's, I mean, and you mentioned people who have same-sex attraction. Um, do you think they really have the option to be seen by our community as anything other than the gay kid?
It's possible. Uh, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It depends on how that person is known initially. Uh, and let's just step back to like point about our community not kind of being very open to someone that doesn't fit the box. I mean, I can understand where that comes from of this kind of xenophobia of having a strong identity is kind of a safeguard against the outside, which was at times literally life or death. So I can see where it comes from. I can't. It's like something that needs to kind of slowly go away because situations have changed. But back to your point, is it possible for that person to be seen? It depends on how they want to portray themselves or how they want to come across. Do they just want to be the person that has the same sex attraction, or they want to be John, the guy who can bake and he's also a marathon runner and he's XYZ and he's very well read. And oh, by the way, I have same sex attraction. Is that like
Because you're presenting it as a choice and a disposition that the person is making to make themselves a one issue identity person, like a unidimensional human being, right? Where you forget the marathon and the service and
yeah, yeah.
all the other things, and like you know, you only see the fact that they're gay because that's you're saying that's the only thing that they present. And I I don't claim to know anything. I'm
Right.
only
I'm not.
offering the alternative as something to consider. That is it the person making that choice, or is it, whether real or imagined, they're feeling that the community looks at them only this way, right? And then, if that's the expectation, then they live up to that expectation.
Chicken or egg. I mean, it's a little. I mean, it comes out. I'm not saying just all people are just presenting themselves as just in general people being unidimensional, but I guess it comes down to how the person was. This a person in the community initially and then came out, or is this a person that's looking to convert but he has same-sex attractions, or someone that went away and wants to come back from, or just wants to come in? Because I know a lot of no, I don't know a lot. I know a couple of people who are very religious and try to live and suffer from same. Yeah, that's just different. Have same-sex attractions and struggle to live a celibate life. I mean, because if you come back down to it, it's not having the attraction that's the issue. It's how you act on it. I mean, premarital sex is premarital sex, whether it's straight, gay, bestiality. I mean, it's all kind of premarital sex, and the church has a clear stance on that, whether or not it's homosexual or straight. People tend to lose that distinction, and somehow that homosexual sex is worse than straight sex in a premarital context. And it's not, or but it's back to your point, because yeah, sorry, is that it comes out. I mean, how do you really know anyone's sexuality unless they let you know about it?
But
I
guess,
mean, that comes down to the thing is,
so what about other things that might be more apparent, right? Something that's more obvious about a person. They do not necessarily make that thing their identity, right? Unless they perceive the community as having singled them out as that thing, right? Like, I'm I'm the guy with the mustache now. Okay, well, fine. Like you're not gonna just think of me as that only. And if you do, then that's okay. Like, because you know, it might not be necessarily something that my wife likes, but I'm okay with it. So
then as mustache guy, do you then all right go? I'll show them and grow out a Rolly handles mustache. I mean, have you ever Rolly fingers? Have you ever seen him? He's
yeah,
a base, yeah, the really big.
yeah.
I mean, do you then go do that since you're mustache guy and double down?
Only if that it strikes a personal chord within me where it does have an emotional reaction. That's I'll show them, right? If it's taken, and this goes back to your relationship with your Sunday school kids, like if you have a good relationship with them, they're not going to take something that, like, looking in from the outside, people are like, you did what? Like, for them, they're like, oh yeah, no, but we like him. And as long as it works in the relationship and as long as the police don't get called, you're fine. Right? But in this case, if someone feels judged, if someone feels ostracized, if someone feels marginalized, if someone feels like, even if it's something silly, right? Like someone who has one blue eye and one green eye, and they think that like, okay, now the only thing that people think of me is that I'm defined by this attribute, they're going to have a complex and they're going to like either go somewhere else where they can accept their different color eyes, or they're going to get colored contacts and like just try to fit in because this thing has become a defining characteristic.
You're telling this to the Irish Egyptian.
So you like
I don't know. To me, on a certain level, it's like, look, this is it. I didn't go down and start being more Egyptian just to prove my bona fides, or go, all right, you think I'm a white guy? Then screw you. I'm going full on, in my case, Jersey City hood rat. I mean, it comes down to kind of, and I mean, yeah, a white Egyptian, it's not that extreme. It happened. So it's not like I was that much of an oddity, but still, I guess it comes down to knowing ultimately what's the point of you being there and being part of that community. Because I've had times, actually 2 times in my life, where I've just walked away for various reasons. There's one time where it was a good 3 or 4 months, didn't set foot in church, didn't do anything related to church, nothing. And then kind of at the end of that, what kind of got me out of that is, in the end, I'm realizing I'm just hurting myself. Ultimately, I'm the one who's getting screwed over because I need it. And I mean, the other time is, I basically told my father confession at the time, you know what, I'm going, I'll find a different sister Orthodox church. And for a period of time, that's what I did. I went around. Each of them was warm and welcoming in their own way, but it was still not home. It's like going to your aunts or your cousins, and it's like you're welcomed, you're loved, but it's not the same. I mean, Ethiopians, I stuck out as a sore thumb. I blended a little better with the Armenians and Syrians, but the Armenian liturgy is just really in structures are very different than ours. So it's a little just, until you finally learn it, it was just weird. And then Syrians, it's kind of a little better, but yeah, it's not that. It's just a matter of ultimately knowing why you're. And I mean, I could have easily ended up just praying in one of those till this day, because they would have given me the same, ultimately, what I needed. But at the end, that was just became a matter of preference. But the fact of walking away and coming back is because I realized what I needed from the community, and the community is not the end in and of itself. And that's what too many people are looking for from church, is that the community is the end in and of itself. And some churches are buying into that kind of understanding as their ministry. So their churches become their social organizers. And there are churches I've seen where their calendar is filled with more social events than spiritual events, which to me is disturbing and saddening, and kind of a church that's lost the plot, so to speak. And I guess it comes back originally, I guess so, and I'm not sure where else to go, but it comes down to knowing what the end goal is. And
Well, I will say at Care One,
And that kind of buys us into this larger theological concept of theosis,
require us to fill out a
the
form
boogeyman,
daily,
that word.
indicating who we
Which
were
you're allowed to say now.
indicating where we have
Yeah,
been
I remember being
from, like,
a soft banning from a
before
church
and
because I
prior
mentioned it
to
in a
showing
talk.
up that day, that you have to write out
But
all the locations
that's a story for
that
another
you
time.
still need to visit.
Uh,
And they have this door,
but
so it
also
doesn't
just kind of,
automatically open anymore.
but just to touch
And
upon that
you
is
check
like,
your temperature, and there's
even
someone
though
who writes down all your information. Like, you don't even have
it's a
access
very
to it
misunderstood
anymore.
concept, even within our
It's-
own
it's
unique
to say the least.
Alexandrian understanding of it, because the Alexandrian Fathers' understanding of this concept is very different than the Eastern Orthodox understanding. Where in Eastern Orthodox understanding, it's the end. For us, it's the means,
No, it's true.
with the end goal being unity with God. This is the means of us achieving immortality and incorruption. So, not to get into like, but once I understand kind of this end goal of who I am and that my identity is
So
to
then what would
ultimately, with all this other stuff that's just,
okay. All right.
it's just in addition, it's the seasonings, so to speak, the spices, not the actual meal of who I'm supposed to be, which is Christ. I mean, I need to reflect Christ in everything I do, even in scaring these kids half to death. There still needs to be some sort of aspect of him that comes through in that. It wasn't that I was scaring them for my own amusement, my sick, whatever, masochistic urges, sadistic urges, or that. But there's ultimately an end goal is to try to somehow
Well, Care One is also
bring Christ and reflect him.
And they have, I guess
So that's kind of, yeah, the end being Christ and bringing him to everybody and being Christ. I mean, how Christian is literally little Christ. And it all, so it reminds me of this anecdote, story, joke, whatever you want to call it. How there's this traveling salesman, he's going through a town, he becomes friendly with because he's in and out of that town a lot, he becomes friends with the counterman at the local diner. So they get to talking about random things every time he's there. And one time the counterman's gone, yeah, could you just remember us in your prayers? We're trying to find a new pastor for our church. And all these guys that keep coming in keep telling us about fire and brimstone and how we got to get right with Jesus or we're going to burn in hell, and we're just not having it. So a couple months later, salesman loops back into that town. He's talking with the counterman, asking him, so how'd it go with finding a pastor? He's like, he's great. He tells us all how we have to get right with Jesus or we're going to burn in hell and fire and brimstone. And he's like, that's all the other guys. What's the difference with this guy? He's saying it with tears in his eyes. So that's the thing, is you always have to reflect Christ and reflect the love. And just even for us, like taking that just for you and me as fathers, or as the priest as fathers, the reason we don't call God the Father because he resembles us. We're called fathers because our fatherhood should reflect his fatherhood. And we're only worthy of the title of father in as far as our fatherhood towards our children reflect the fatherhood of God. So people so it's that kind of, I guess, to put it in big words, that incarnational existence, that everything we do needs to be in that. So like everything about my identity, yeah, because like Christ says, everybody has many members, but ultimately, like my hands are different than my feet, different than my eyes, but it's all the same DNA. It's the same thing with me as a person, where yeah, and us as individuals, we're all very different in different aspects to us, but ultimately everything has to kind of point back to Christ. So how does that tie into someone that's kind of ostracized from the community? And I mean, yes, the community has to do much better in accepting everybody. Just being more accepting and loving. Actually, not necessarily, because accepting is kind of a loaded word, because does that mean you take the person, it becomes that kind of namby pamby malish and okay, whereas we need to love the individual. I mean, like my mother, she loved me greatly but never accepted if I came home with a B. I mean, every Egyptian kid knows it's like,
No, I don't know what you mean.
yeah, 98. Why? What happened to the 2 points? 100? Why didn't you ask for extra credit?
Right.
I mean, but it's because out of their love, in a kind of twisted way, they want us to be better. Their love wants us to be better than to them, better than to be the best of who we are, and that ultimately is to be like Christ. So the community, yes, needs to love everybody, and in their love, want the person to be better. Not, sorry, in their love, the person who's being loved wants to be better to feel more worthy of that love. And on the flip side, that person, if in accepting that love, have to understand kind of that love brings with it, there's a burden. I mean, there's or a yoke. But as a Chris, it's light and sweet. That, or no, let me change that. Rephrase that. That if I truly feel and accept that love, which is ultimately God's love, I have to come away transformed by it to be better, to be more because of it. I mean, even looking in our flawed human relationships, because of my wife, I don't walk around with steel toe boots and wearing a t-shirt all the time now. I mean, because even though she'll still love me regardless, she would prefer that I didn't. And because of my love for her and then accepting her love, I don't. I mean, there are probably tons of other things she wants me to change, but again, flawed humans. And so, and I still
So
don't think I
going back to
really
the
answered.
identity issue, I think what I'm hearing from you is that it's a two-way street, right? It's
Yeah.
something that the community helps us to form, but it's also something that we have to kind of take a responsibility for ourselves to form.
Right.
And if the community wants to push us into, being a single identity, like you're the white looking guy, then, you can kind of say, well, no, I'm more than that.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason, like the single identity issue or others, you say I need a little break, um, the important thing is to find a place where you feel like you can um, be yourself, and if it's a faith community, um, be one with God. And if it's another type of community, that it's something where you kind of align with the ideals enough that it doesn't necessarily dictate to you who you are, but helps you to discover better who you are.
Right. And I forget, I don't know if it's C.S. Lewis or who it was that's basically said that God doesn't wish an obliteration of ourselves, but to be truly who we are in Him.
That's
'Cause,
the
like,
Screwtape letters, actually. That's
yeah,
presented as the opposite, where the demon is saying, I want to devour this person and obliterate them, but you know,
right,
talking about God actually wants them to be themselves.
yeah. And I mean that's kind of like, I guess what we're saying is it's not necessarily just for faith based communities, but just in general. I just see a lot of people becoming two dimensional, and it's just in all things. They just allow themselves to become caricatures of who they are, and it it bothers me because I know it could have easily happened to myself, and it could easily happen to anyone. And it's that I understand that even as complex as I am, I'm probably a very simple-minded person, and that there's people that probably have more depth and more complexity to them, but in wanting to belong to one thing or another, allow themselves to become these two-dimensional beings, and they lose out, we lose out from those aspects of themselves.
Well, I think as we wind down here, I must ask you something. Um, do you think we should post this?
I don't know. I like, honestly, I feel like in the middle there, just my work. Like, I don't mind about the stuff in the beginning. That stuff's fine. The stuff at the end, the stuff in the middle, I don't think my wording was the best, and it kind of, well, I said what I said. I don't want. I feel like it'll, and I don't mean it to be. It's tough because I usually don't care if someone gets offended by something I say, but because not because I purposely give offense, but if they inadvertently because get offended, c'est la vie. But I don't want to feel like, I don't want it to come across that I'm trying to be offensive, especially with homosexuality being a very charged topic and within the community. And I don't know. And I know you don't want to edit.
No, there's no editing. There's no editing. That's
So
the
it's like,
that's the only rule. That's the
yeah.
only rule. There's no editing.
So like in the middle, yeah, where my wording might not have been whatever is considered proper wording these days, because I don't know. I'm too old to keep up with.
So I think if someone's listening to this and they were like, what just happened? Like, what is wrong with these two?
Yeah.
They'll know that at least we had some sense,
Yeah, like I don't.
maybe there's a
Yeah,
little too much.
yeah, I don't mean to portray people as people are of whatever ilk are unidimensional, and it just seems like the world that we're in, kind of identity politics, puts people into, you need to be one this thing. You can't be other things because you then don't fit in that identity, and people want to conform to that. Like the idea of a black conservative, they're like unicorns. Whereas, oh, you're black, then you have to be liberal and democratic and so on or so forth. Or if you're Indian, you need to be very technical and very intelligent, and it's basically stereotypes in reverse, or or socially acceptable stereotypes now they've become.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I take it as kind of railing against that idea, and so I don't know.
So how do we move in that direction as a community? How do we move in the direction where someone feels able to be themselves and not have this either under the surface thing that they reveal or on the surface thing become something that defines them? Because we agree
Yeah,
that sometimes the person has a responsibility, right?
right.
We also agree that the community sometimes has the responsibility. So maybe we can't do anything to affect each individual person,
Right.
and maybe it's just as hard to influence the community. But if enough people think this way, then we maybe have a chance. So
Right.
how do enough of us think, okay, like, so you have one blue eye and one, green eye. Okay.
I'm just
You
laughing because
decided not to be a pharmacist. Okay.
that's funny because I once had a friend's father sit down for a 4-hour talk with me onto how I'm ruining my life by not going into medicine. Being a science major and not going into medicine just didn't enter into their worldview. But anyway, back to your question, how can we outbreed the others and raise our children that way? But I mean, that's the thing, is just being the influence on others. I mean, in serving, have that mindset instill in these kids that, yeah, everyone's different. I mean, it's and just work on them that way and try to point out to each one how they're not a monolith and that they don't 100% conform, and that yet we still accept them and they should pay it forward, so to speak, or show that same to the other.
I think that's fair. Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate your wisdom as always. Any parting words for anyone who happens to have dug this up out of some archive, because we're going to dig it deep, deep, deep?
I'm not as bad as you think I am. I'm really a good, nice guy. I don't know. Yeah, that's, yeah, and part of it is just my own, like I mentioned to you offline, that most of my conversations have been with a 2 and 4-year-olds, so I have yet to kind of figure out how to formulate words to speak to normal adults. So I forgive my lack of eloquence. The
Okay.
intentions are good.
Listen, if this thing takes off, I'll have you back in a few years when you're talking to 6 and 8-year-olds.
Yeah, I never thought I'd have to tell a kid, stop biting Baba Krolos. Anyway.
Things Coptic parents say.
I don't think any other Coptic parent has said.
No.
Well, maybe, who knows, but
Maybe you'll have a following. You guys can do the Don't Bite Baba Carlos fan club.
no, it's funny because the other one is very good friends with him. To the point where, like, when she was 2 or 3 years old, she's just randomly going around saying agios, 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 kyrios. And I didn't teach her that. Her mother didn't teach her that. She didn't hear it from the liturgy. I'm like, where'd you learn to hear that? She's like, Baba Krolos told me to pray that. I'm like, okay.
Okay.
You and him, you guys are good. I'm not going to get involved with that.
Well, thank you,
Anyway,
Peter. It's
thank you.
Always a pleasure, and I thank you for blowing our minds as always, and I thank our listeners and viewers.
In
Bye.
retrospect, if you want to redo this, maybe.
I think it's too late.